Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're exploring the life and the mind of an absolutely astonishing figure. We're looking at a man whose brilliance literally shaped the course of human knowledge, somehow perfectly blending the hard sciences with the deepest, most complex mysteries of human existence. I'm talking about the 11th century polymath, Ibn Sina, also known in the West as Avicenna. Now, whether you're already familiar with his work or you're hearing his name for the very first time, the sheer scale of what this one single individual achieved is frankly going to blow you away. Think about this for a second. What if the foundations of modern medicine and the mysteries of human consciousness were actually unlocked 1,000 years ago? I mean, it sounds like science fiction, right? We love to think of things like clinical trials, precision medicine, and the psychology of consciousness as thoroughly modern inventions. But what if I told you that the foundational blueprints for all of these concepts were already written down a whole millennium ago? Today, we're going on an incredible journey. We're going to trace Ibn Sina's steps from his groundbreaking physical science all the way to his breathtaking exploration of the metaphysical realm.
So, born back in 980 CE near Bukhara, which is in modern-day Uzbekistan, we actually know what Ibn Sina looked like today thanks to some pretty amazing studies done on his skull. And to call this guy a child prodigy would be a massive understatement. By age 10, he had completely memorized the entire Quran. By 16, he pivoted and turned his attention to medicine. And by the time he was just 18 years old, he claimed to have mastered literally all the sciences of his time. Over his lifetime, he wrote roughly 450 books across a staggering variety of disciplines. We're talking everything from astronomy to chemistry, logic, and even poetry.
Okay, let's dive into this, because his medical prophecies are nothing short of miraculous. In 1025 CE, he wrote this massive 5-volume encyclopedia called the Canon of Medicine, and it became the absolute standard medical textbook in both the Islamic world and Europe for over 600 years. And inside it, concepts that were centuries ahead of their time. He suggested that diseases spread through contaminated water and air, basically predicting germ theory 800 years before Louis Pasteur. He insisted doctors have to observe, reason, and test, which is the definition of evidence-based medicine. He said drugs should be tested before being accepted as effective. Hello, clinical trials. He even elevated diet and lifestyle to the level of treatment and taught that every single person needs a tailored approach based on their unique constitution, which is exactly what we call personalized medicine today.
You gotta remember, before Ibn Sina, medicine was kind of just seen as a craft, a trade passed down. But he elevated it to a highly structured, logical science. In the very first volume of his canon, he defined it as the science by which we learn the various states of the human body, in health and when not in health, and the means by which health is likely to be lost, and, when lost, how to restore it. Notice that two-part goal? He believed a physician's job was equally to preserve health in the healthy and restore it in the sick. He completely revolutionized the role of the doctor into that of a rigorous scientist. So, to understand how he actually treated the physical body, we have to look at his foundational theory. Building on Greek thought, Ibn Sina taught that the body is governed by 4 humors. You've got blood, which is warm and moist, linked to air. Phlegm is cold and moist, linked to water. Yellow bile is warm and dry, mapped to fire. And black bile is cold and dry, mapped to earth. To Ibn Sina, illness wasn't just some random curse. It was a mechanical failure. Disease happened when these humors fell out of balance, and a doctor's job was to use logic and medicine to restore that precise, delicate equilibrium. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Ibn Sina didn't just stop at the physical elements. He recognized this profound bridge between the body and the mind. He realized that emotions like grief, fear, and severe stress cause actual physical illness. Just think about that. 1,000 years ago, he was laying the groundwork for what we now call psychosomatic medicine. He understood that you can't just treat the flesh. You absolutely have to treat the emotional state, because fear literally makes the heart race, and grief physically weakens the immune system. And this realization naturally led him to ask a much bigger question. If the mind can control the body, what exactly is the mind? What is the soul? To answer that, Ibn Sina created one of the most famous thought experiments in the entire history of philosophy. I actually want you to try this with me right now. Imagine you are created, fully formed, floating in midair in a total, absolute void. You cannot see, you cannot hear, you can't feel the air or even touch your own body. You have absolutely zero sensory input from the physical world. The question is, would you still be aware of yourself? Would you still know that you exist? For Ibn Sina, the answer was a resounding yes. That pure, unadulterated self-awareness, completely independent of the physical body and all your senses, that is the soul. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how he structured this whole concept in his first major philosophical work, the Compendium on the Soul. He didn't just view the soul as some single mystical blob. He mapped out a brilliant hierarchical architecture of consciousness. Basically, every living thing has a soul, but in different capacities. At the base, you have the vegetative soul, which is found in plants, animals, and humans. Above that is the animal soul, which adds sensation. And at the very top, possessed only by humans, is the rational soul, giving us our reason and intellect.
Let's look a bit closer at that foundational level, the vegetative soul. Ibn Sina argued that even the most basic level of life is not random at all. It requires the soul's intelligent direction. First, it powers nutrition, which is that constant balancing act of taking in matter to replace what the body naturally loses. Second, it directs growth. A tree doesn't just expand randomly, right? It expands proportionally in 3 dimensions, showing intelligent design. And finally, it drives reproduction, which Ibn Sina beautifully described as the soul's way of achieving a kind of immortality. Since individual bodies die, life continues by generating new beings.
Moving up to the animal soul, things get incredibly sophisticated. Here, Ibn Sina literally drew the first map of the mind. Beyond our 5 external senses like sight and hearing, he identified 5 internal senses located in specific regions of the brain. You have common sense unifying what you see and hear, and imagination storing those images. But his most groundbreaking concept by far is estimation. Estimation is the raw instinct that grasps invisible meanings. It's the reason a baby lamb instantly feels terror upon seeing a wolf, even if it has never seen a wolf before and obviously hasn't used logic to figure out it's dangerous. The soul immediately perceives the threat. And finally, we reach the crown of his theory, the rational soul, which is unique to human beings. Ibn Sina divided this into the theoretical intellect, which is how we acquire absolute truth and knowledge, and the practical intellect, which guides our ethics, our skills, and how we actually govern ourselves in the world. Now here is the absolutely crucial point for Ibn Sina. Because the rational soul deals with abstract immaterial thoughts, things like justice, mathematics, and infinity, it has no physical form. And because it has no physical form, it cannot decay. Therefore, the rational soul survives the death of the physical body.
And this brilliantly illustrates his overarching view of human existence. He writes, "The soul is like a sailor. The body is like a ship. The sailor is not the ship. He controls it, depends on it, but remains fundamentally distinct. The soul uses the brain as its headquarters, communicating through the nervous system and the vital spirits in the blood, but it cannot be reduced to mere flesh. I mean, you can cut a body in half, but you cannot cut a thought in half. When the ship is eventually destroyed, the sailor simply moves on."
So when the ship sinks, where does the sailor actually go? Well, in his Compendium on the Soul, Ibn Sina charts the ultimate trajectory of our consciousness. He believed the soul originates from a divine source, descending into the physical body at birth. Our whole purpose on earth is to gather knowledge and develop virtue. So when we die, it is not a destruction, but a liberation. He likened it to a bird finally being let out of a cage. The fully developed, perfected soul then returns to its divine source, existing in a state of eternal joy and pure contemplation of truth.
Which brings us to this profound final thought from his writings. By understanding medicine, we maintain the ship. But by understanding our consciousness, we truly come to know the sailor. Ibn Sina firmly believed that the ultimate key to understanding the vast, divine universe wasn't just looking up at the stars, but looking inward. To master your own consciousness is to connect with the infinite. It really makes you wonder, with all our shiny modern technology, have we truly caught up to the wisdom of a man who looked inside himself 1,000 years ago? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.